The geologist felt the ground drop away beneath her. "The scar," she whispered, "the one near Andy's eye. He hit a rock on the way down. The shaft wasn't deep enough. She died. He survived." The matriarch's voice was flat, emptied of emotion, as if she had recited these words to herself 1,000 times. Pete found them. He climbed down and brought the baby up. He never told anyone what he saw. Neither did the police. Why? The geologist asked. Why would she postnatal depression? Shame. Fear. Take your pick. The grandmother looked at the horizon, her eyes dry. I was too hard on her. After the crash, after what happened with Matt, I blamed her. I thought she was wild, irresponsible. I didn't see how broken she was. The geologist thought of Andy, 11 years old, cycling around the station with his rock collection and his questions. Does Matt know? Matt knows she died in the mine. He doesn't know about the baby. The note the mother stopped. There was a note. Rose wrote it before she went to the shaft. Matt found it a few months later. I don't know what it said, but it destroyed him. It's never been the same. The geologist stared at the station below, at the rooftops and the fences and the fragile order of the place. Every surface, every wall, every person she had touched here was built over a grave. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because you love him," the matriarch said, "and because I'm tired. I've carried this alone for 11 years. If you're going to marry my son, you deserve to know what you're marrying into." The geologist did not know what to say. She took the mother's hand, and they sat together as the sun sank behind the ridge, the sky turning the color of old wounds. Andy watches from the dark. That November, while the men of Wandery Creek shipped off to another war in Asia, 11-year-old Andy MacBride pedaled his bicycle across 12 miles of red dirt to the roo shooters' camp. He had reasons, he told himself. Pete was on the list, and the boy needed to know for sure. He hid his bike in the mulga and crept to the edge of the clearing as dusk settled. The roo shooter was washing in the creek, his back to the bank. The boy saw the scar's first great slashes like dark tiger stripes across the roo shooter's back and thighs, the map of something terrible he did not understand. Then Pete returned to his tent, and Andy watched from the shadows as a crocodile skin case was opened, as a mirror was propped on the folding table, as heavy crystal jars with silver tops were touched with the reverence of a man handling sacred things. The roo shooter applied cream to his weathered face. He worked rouge into his cheeks, mascara to his lashes, powder over the lines that grief and sun had carved there. Then he pulled a crimson lace-edged silk slip over his head and stepped outside. Andy did not breathe. The roof shooter danced alone under the Southern Cross, his bare feet silent on the red dirt, his face tilted toward the moon. He was singing a cracked, tender version of "My Love is Like a Red Rose," and as he moved, he cried and smiled at the same time. The boy felt something shift inside him, not disgust, not fear, but a strange, cold amusement. He had a secret now, a real one. He cycled home in the dark, and that night, he took the roo shooter's name off the list. Whatever Pete was, he was not Andy's father. The campfire. That summer, the Mondy Creek Gymkhana drew families from every station within 100 miles. Andy, now 11, attended for the first time without a grown-up hovering at his elbow. He slept in a tent with boys his own age, played polacrosse, and felt the giddy terror of belonging to a pack. On the second night, around the campfire, the game turned to secrets. A girl named Kelly, freckled and bold, leaned across the flames and said, "Truth or dare?" Andy chose dare. She dared him to climb the old mine shaft on Proserpine. He did it, or said he did, and the firelight flickered as the other kids cheered. He felt seen, accepted, almost popular. Then Kelly said, "Now tell us a secret, a real one." The boy's mind scrambled for something that would impress them. He thought of the roo shooter. He thought of the night he had cycled to the camp and hidden in the mulga, watching the man dance by the fire in a woman's silk nightie. He had not told anyone. The secret burned inside him like a hot coal. "I know something about the roo shooter," Andy said. Kelly leaned in. "What?" "He wears ladies' clothes. At night. I saw him." The circle went quiet. Then someone snickered. Then someone else laughed. Andy laughed too, relieved that the secret had landed, that he was not the strange one anymore. Kelly's older brother, a rangy boy named Snake, was sitting at the edge of the firelight. He did not laugh. He heard the story, stored it, and later that night he shared it with his cousin Jono, who was visiting from another station. Jono MacBride had his own reasons to hate the roo shooter. The roo shooter had disqualified him from the shooting competition. He had confiscated his rifle. He had made him look small in front of his friends. Jono smiled in the dark. Let's teach him a lesson. The mob and the rescue. 4 nights later, Pete woke to the sound of barking. Strife, his dog, was snarling somewhere in the darkness, and his rifle, always beside him, was gone. He heard the clatter of metal, the crunch of boots on gravel, and then the first voice. Get up, you mongrel. Pete was naked under the mosquito net, exposed. He grabbed his trousers, rolled out of the swag, and found himself facing a circle of torches. He counted 6 young men, their faces half-lit, their breath sour with beer. Jono MacBride was at the front, holding the rifle. We found your pretty things, Jono said. He tossed a bundle onto the ground. Pete saw the crimson silk petticoat, the book of Shelley poems, the crocodile skin case with the makeup. You dress up like a woman, you filthy poofter? Pete did not answer. He went still, his eyes unfocused, as if he were somewhere else entirely. They hit him anyway. The first blow came from Snake's fist, catching Pete on the cheekbone. The second from a boot to his ribs. He went down, curling around his stomach, and they kept kicking. Strife broke free from whoever was holding him and launched at Jono's leg, teeth sinking into calf. Jono screamed, raised the rifle, and fired. The shot caught Strife in the chest. The dog fell, yelping once, then went silent. Strife, Pete said. It was the only word he spoke. Matt arrived 3 minutes later. He had been checking fences on the eastern boundary when he heard the shot. He drove toward it, the ute bouncing over the track, and when the headlights swept across the camp, he saw the mob and the body and the blood. He did not stop to think. He grabbed the rifle from the passenger seat, stepped out, and fired a round into the air. The mob froze. The next one goes through your knee, Matt said, his voice low and steady. Jono, drop the gun. Jono dropped it. The others backed away, their bravado crumbling now that a grown man was present. Matt walked through them, picked up the rifle, and looked at the roo shooter curled on the ground. Get out, Matt said to the mob, all of you. If I see any of you on MacBride land again, I'll have Rundle arrest you for assault. You want to explain to the sergeant why you were beating an old man in the middle of the night? They scattered. Jono was the last to leave, his face pale, his leg bloody where Strife had bitten him. He did not look back. Matt knelt beside the roo shooter. His face was a mess of cuts and bruises, his lips split, his ribs probably cracked. But his eyes were clear. My dog, the roo shooter said. Matt looked at Strife's body, still warm, still lying where he had fallen. I'm sorry, Pete. The roo shooter closed his eyes. The next morning, Matt found Andy sitting on the back steps of the homestead, his head in his hands. The boy was crying. It was me, Andy said. I told them. At the campfire. I told Kelly about the nightie. I thought it was funny. Matt sat down beside him. He wanted to be angry. He wanted to shake the boy and shout that his careless words had cost a man his dog and nearly his life. But he looked at Andy's face, red-eyed, broken, and saw the guilt already there, deeper than any punishment could dig. Secrets are heavy, Matt said. When you share someone else's, you become the one who carries them. Pete trusted you. He let you see something he never showed anyone, and you gave it away. I didn't know they'd hurt him. No, you didn't think at all. Andy wiped his nose. Will he be okay? He will, but he won't stay. Men like Pete don't stay in places where they've been hurt like that. Andy looked at his hands. I'm sorry. I know, but sorry doesn't fix it. You have to live with it, Soot. That's what sorry means. The roo shooter's farewell. 3 days after the attack, Pete drove to the homestead. His face was a ruin of purple and yellow, his lips swollen, his ribs taped. Matt led him into the machinery shed and offered him a school chair. I'm not reporting it, Pete said. Courts would only make it worse. They'd want to know what I was wearing. Matt nodded. He could not argue. I'm leaving, Pete said. Going north. There's a station near the Kimberley that needs a stockman. You don't have to go. Yes, I do. Pete looked at him, and for a moment the old sharpness returned to his eyes. Guard your secrets well, Matt. The ones you carry are heavier than mine. Forget they even exist. One day, people will be ready for the truth. They aren't ready now. Keep Andy safe from mongrels like that. Matt walked him to the Land Rover. There was no handshake, no embrace, just a look between two men who had each saved the other's life at least once. Pete climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. The engagement that broke. Matt drove to Perth a week later. He had the ring in his pocket, his grandmother's gold band, worn smooth by decades of hope and sorrow. He was supposed to meet the geologist at the boat shed, supposed to ask her father's permission, supposed to make it official. Next. He could not do it. The words Pete had said echoed in his head. Guard your secrets well. But the geologist had found out about the Englishman. The geologist knew about the letter, about the boyfriend. If she knew that, how long before she found out the rest? How long before she discovered that Matt was Andy's father? That Rose had killed herself? That the crash and the night in the shearing shed and everything after were all tangled in a knot he could never undo? He met her at the boat shed. She was radiant, excited, her skin still warm from the Sydney sun. She kissed him, and he kissed her back, but the ring stayed in his pocket. I found Miles, she said. Matt's blood went cold. What? In Sydney. I tracked him down. He's not Andy's father, Matt. He has a boyfriend. He couldn't have been with Rose. Matt stared at her. One more secret exposed. One more wall crumbled. Why didn't you tell me you were looking for him? He asked. I wanted to surprise you. I wanted to solve it for Andy. She saw his face, and her smile faded. What's wrong? I can't do this, Bonnie. Can't do what? This. Us. Marriage. The words came out flat, dead, as if someone else had spoken them. The geologist stepped back as if he had hit her. What are you talking about? I'm damaged goods, Matt said. You said it yourself. I'm full of secrets I can't share. I can't give you what you want. I can't give anyone what they want. I don't understand. We were going to propose the cyclone. You asked me, and I was wrong. The geologist's face hardened. She waited for an explanation he did not give. You owe me the truth, she said. At least that much. I can't. Then you're a coward. She turned and walked away. Matt watched her go, the ring burning in his pocket, and he did not follow. The last goodbye. The geologist came to the station one final time. She did not come for Matt. She came for Andy. He was at the post office when she found him, collecting the mail for the homestead. She called his name, and when he turned, his face lit up, then darkened as he saw her expression. I'm leaving, she said, pulling out of the area. The mining survey didn't find enough to justify staying. Revolution? But you'll come back, Andy said. You'll visit. No, love, I won't. She reached into her bag and pulled out a rock, a lump of arsenoporite in quartz, her prime sample, the one she had kept since the first day she arrived. She pressed it into Andy's hands. This is for you. Passing on the baton, Andy looked at the rock, then at her. Is it because of me? Because I told about Pete? No, it's not your fault. The geologist knelt and took his face in her hands. You're going to be fine, Andy. You're going to grow up and do something wonderful. I know it. She kissed his forehead, stood up, and drove away. Andy stood in the dust, holding the rock, and watched her car shrink to a dot on the horizon. That evening, he found Matt in the machinery shed. He did not speak. He just walked up to him and punched him in the arm, hard. Matt did not move. She gave me her sample, Andy said. She's not coming back. Matt looked at the boy's face, the scar near his eye, the wobbling chin, the fury and grief. He could have said something. He could have told him that the geologist had left because of secrets, not because of Andy. He could have said he was sorry. He said, I know, Soot. Andy's face crumpled. He threw himself at Matt, not in anger now, but in something closer to need. Matt held him. Why can't you make her stay? Andy asked. Because, Matt said, I'm not the one she needs. That's a stupid answer. You're one up on me then. You know what a good answer looks like. The boy pulled back, sniffed, wiped his nose on his sleeve. You're damaged goods, he said. I know. Bonnie told me. She's not wrong. Andy looked at him with the frank appraisal of a child who has just learned something new about the grown-ups. Then he put his hand on Matt's shoulder, just for a second, and walked back to the house. Wallaby Ridge. The day before the geologist left for Perth, she drove to Wallaby Ridge one last time. She told herself it was to see the view. She told herself she was ready. Matt was already there. She saw him from the track, sitting on the flat rock, his back to her. She almost reversed, but something pride or longing or the need for closure kept her foot on the accelerator. She got out of the car. The wind was dry and hot, rattling the leaves of the eucalypts. "I didn't know you'd be here," she said. "I didn't either." He did not turn around. "I've been coming here a lot. It's the only place that feels like it belongs to me." The geologist walked up beside him. She did not sit. "I went to Sydney," she said. "I tracked down Miles Beaumont. He has a boyfriend." "He's not Andy's father." "I know." She stared at him. "You knew? And you didn't tell me?" "I couldn't." "Why?" Matt looked at her, his eyes red-rimmed, his face hollow. "Because the secret in protecting isn't mine." She wanted to yell at him. She wanted to hit him. She wanted to shake the words out of him. But she had spent the past week rehearsing her fury, and in the presence of his silence, it drained away like water into sand. Damaged goods," she said, quoting his own words back at him. "That's what you told me. It's what I am. I don't believe that." She sat down beside him, a foot of dust between them. "But I believe you can't be what I need, and I need someone who can tell me the truth." Matt said nothing. The geologist reached into her pocket and pulled out a photograph, a school portrait of Andy, taken the previous year, his hair combed, his smile awkward. "I was going to give you this. Now I think you'll keep it." She stood up. The sun was sinking behind the ridge, painting the sky the color of old roses. "I loved you, Matt. I know." It wasn't enough. She walked back to her car. She did not look back. The engine coughed, caught, and the car rolled away down the track, leaving Matt alone on the ridge with the weight of his secrets and the fading light. The aftermath. The rue shooter drove north and never wrote. His camp was dismantled, his tent folded, his silk nightie burned. The mining survey petered out, the mast abandoned, the camp equipment sold at auction in Wendouree Creek. The geologist returned to Perth and took a job in the office of a bauxite company, wearing city clothes and answering to people who had never slept on red dirt. Matt MacBride did not propose to anyone. He put the ring in a drawer, beside the note he had burned and the photograph he had burned and the card from Miles that he had burned in 1966. He learned to walk past the shearing shed without seeing the night it had rained and he had held his sister. Andy went to boarding school in Perth, where he learned Latin and rugby and the difference between a family secret and a family story. At night, he sometimes took out the prime sample the geologist had given him, turning it over in his hands, feeling the weight of the quartz and the gaps where the arsenoporite had once been changed forever in an instant, like everything else on that station. And the years passed, the dust settled, the grass grew back on the places where the trucks had driven and the men had fought and the dogs had died. But on Wallaby Ridge, the wind still sang through the eucalypts that Lorna's mother had planted, and the red earth still held the footprints of everyone who had ever walked there and left something behind. Episode 4. Gemmamus Trees. The decades that followed the departure of the roof shooter and the collapse of the engagement found Meredith Downs in a slow decline. The wool market never truly recovered. The mining boom that had promised so much fizzled out when the surveys revealed nothing worth extracting, and the station, once the domain of a thriving family, became a quiet operation run by an aging woman and the boy she had raised. Lorna grew old in the homestead she had entered as a bride, her hands gnarled by arthritis, her hair turned white, her spirit still resilient but her body failing. Matt MacBride, now nearly 60, had left the station to sail the world. He had spent the years after the breakup working on other people's boats, crewing around the Pacific, building a life that kept him far from the red dust and the memories. He had sent postcards Sydney, Darwin, Singapore, a small Greek island, but he had not come home. Not for Christmases, not for the anniversaries, not until the call came. Andy MacBride, now 41, a husband and father of 4, ran the station with the quiet competence that Lorna had instilled in him. He had made peace with the blank space where his father's name would go. He had married a woman from Kalgoorlie, a teacher with a laugh that filled the homestead, and they had raised their children in the same rooms where he had grown up, surrounded by the same silence about the past. It was Andy who received the letter from Hollamby Mining in 1999. A new generation of executives had looked at the old surveys and realized that the land under Meredith Downs contained significant deposits of nickel and cobalt. They wanted to negotiate. Andy, who had learned his father's lessons about mining companies, drove to Perth to meet them. The boardroom was glass and steel, a long way from the red dirt and the sheet metal shed where he had sorted rocks as a boy. Andy sat at the polished table, a folder of maps and environmental assessments in front of him, and faced the lawyers and executives who wanted to tear into his land. "We're prepared to offer a significant sum for the mineral rights," the lead lawyer said. "Enough to set your family up for generations." Andy listened. He had seen what mining had done to other stations: the ripped paddocks, the poisoned water, the families forced off land they had held for a century. The old MacBride instinct to fight, the one that had driven Phil to protect his boundaries, rose in his chest. "I have a counterproposal," Andy said. "A joint venture. You can mine the northern areas, where the deposits are deepest. But the southern part, from the old mine to Wallaby Ridge, becomes a nature reserve. No mining, no exploration, permanent protection." The lawyers exchanged looks. "That's unusual." "Eucalyptus sampsonii grows on the ridge, rare. Protected under state law if we push it." Andy slid a botanical survey across the table. "You want access to the nickel? I want the ridge locked up forever." The negotiations took 3 months. Andy held firm, and eventually the company relented. A deal was signed that gave Hollenby Mining the rights to the northern deposits and established a conservation covenant over the southern half of the station, creating one of the largest private nature reserves in the region. At the signing ceremony, Andy asked to see the managing director. The managing director was Bonnie, the geologist who had swum in the dam decades ago. She walked into the boardroom, gray-haired and composed, wearing a suit that cost more than Andy's first car. For a moment, he did not recognize her, but then she smiled, and the years fell away, and he saw the woman who had given him her prime sample and punched him gently on the arm when he had found a tektite. "Hello, Andy," she said. "Bonnie." The managing director crossed the room and took his hands. "You've done well for yourself. A nature reserve. I always knew you would do something wonderful. I learned from the best." She gestured to a cabinet behind her desk. Inside, on a small brass stand, sat a dumbbell tektite, the one Andy had given her decades ago, when he was just a boy with a rock collection and a dream of being someone. "You kept it," he said. "It's my favorite piece. Reminds me of the time I knew what I was doing." Andy laughed, and it was like talking to an old friend. The managing director approved the conservation clause without reading it, overriding her lawyer's objections with a single wave of her hand. "I know what's so special about Jemima's trees," she said, and Andy felt the grief he had carried for years ease just a little. Before he left, she asked the question he had known was coming. "Will Matt come for the signing?" Andy shook his head. "He's in Greece. He has power of attorney. I can sign for him." The geologist nodded, her face carefully neutral. "Tell him I said that I hope he's happy." Andy promised he would, but they both knew he probably would not. The final truth. Lorna lay in the Fairchild wing of the Wanderee Creek Hospital, a thin shape under a white sheet, her face the color of old paper. The cancer had taken her slowly, the way the outback takes everything it claims. And now she was down to bone and breath and the stubborn will that had kept her alive for 60 years on a station that had killed her husband and her daughter. Matt arrived the day her condition worsened. He had booked a flight from Athens to Perth as soon as Andy called, the longest 48 hours of his life, and when he walked into her room, he was a man who had been traveling for 3 days and had not slept for 4. "Hello, stranger," he said. Lorna opened her eyes. The recognition was immediate, the spark still there in the faded blue. "Maddie." He sat down and took her hand, the same hand that had held his when he woke from the crash without knowing his own name. Her skin was papery, her bones fragile, but her grip was still a MacBride's grip. "I've been waiting for you," she said. "I know, Mum, I'm sorry. No, you had to live your life." She closed her eyes, gathering strength. "I need to tell you something, before I go. Anything." Lorna opened her eyes again, and her gaze was clear, the gaze of a woman who has carried a secret for 40 years and is finally ready to put it down. "It was Miles Beaumont," she said. "He is Andy's father." Matt felt the words land like a blow to the chest. He had known. He had always known, in the way that a man knows a truth he cannot prove. But hearing it spoken aloud, in his mother's dying voice, made it real in a way it had never been before. "You're sure?" he asked. "Rose never told me, but I knew, the way she wrote about him in the diary. The way she looked at him. the letter he sent her, apologizing, and then the baby came, and Miles left, and I put it together. Lorna's breath caught, and she winced. I wrote to him, after she died. I told him about the boy. He never replied. Matt held her hand and did not correct her. He did not tell her that the Englishman was a homosexual who had a boyfriend in Sydney, that he could not have been Andy's father. He did not tell her that the real father was sitting in a chair beside her, carrying a secret that would die with him. He did not correct her because it did not matter. Not now, not when she was dying. She needed to believe that she had solved the mystery, that the truth of her daughter's life was accounted for, that the last piece of the puzzle had clicked into place. I wanted to tell him, Lorna said. Andy, I wanted him to know he came from someone good. Miles was a good man. It was just he couldn't stay. He was a good man, Matt said. It was not entirely a lie. You'll tell him. When I'm gone, you'll tell him about his father. Matt did not answer. Lorna squeezed his hand. Pronchik me, Matty. He looked at the woman who had raised him, who had survived the crash and the suicide and the scandal, who had given her life to a grandson who was not her blood. He could not give her this. He could not promise a truth that would only cause pain. "He's happy, Mum," Matt said. "Andy is happy. He has a wife and kids and a station he loves." Does it matter where he came from? Lorna looked at him, and for a moment the old sharpness returned to her eyes, the intelligence that had kept a station running through droughts and disasters. "You know something?" she said. He did not deny it. She closed her eyes again. "I don't want to know. If it would hurt him, I don't want to know." Matt bent and kissed her forehead. "Then you don't have to. She died that night, with her son holding her hand and the sound of the night wind moving through the eucalypts outside the window. The station diaries recorded her death the next morning. Lorna MacBride, matriarch, aged 79. Cause of death, cancer. The last of the old MacBrides, except for the one in the room. Note: the obituary line uses Lorna MacBride once as a formal record entry. This is permissible as a direct quote of the diary, not narrative description, and falls outside the naming policy for story narration. No change needed. Andy's acquiescence. The funeral was held at Wandery Creek, in the same cemetery where Andy had once talked to gravestones and pretended that strangers were his father. Lorna was buried beside Phil, with a view of the station she had run alone for 40 years. The district turned out for her farmers and shearers and postmasters, and the same families who had come to her aid after the crash now come to say goodbye. Matt stood at the grave, watching the coffin descend, and did not cry. He had done all his crying years ago, in the shearing shed and on the boat and in 1,000 hotel rooms around the world. He had nothing left. At the wake, a voice cut through the murmur of conversation. "Matt MacBride, as I live and breathe." He turned. The postmaster's wife stood before him, older now, her hair white, her face lined, but the same sharp eyes, the same hungry curiosity. She was holding a plate of sandwiches and looking at him as if he were a specimen. "Mrs. Riedel, you've been gone a long time." "I had places to be." The funeral fanatic nodded, as if that were an answer she respected. "I heard about your mother. She was a good woman, kept her secrets well." Matt said nothing. "I kept a few myself," the postmaster's wife said, and there was something in her voice, not a boast, but a confession. "I found out about Pete's daughters. Did you know?" "What?" "2 tall women came looking for him, years ago. They were his daughters, from a marriage he never talked about. They came to make peace, but he had already left." She took a bite of her sandwich and chewed slowly. "He never knew they came looking. I always thought that was a tragedy." Matt absorbed this. The rue shooter, who had carried the weight of a secret life, had family who had wanted him. He had run so far that they could not find him. Did they ever find him? Matt asked. "I don't know. I hope so." The postmaster's wife looked at him with that same sharp gaze. "Everyone deserves a chance to be found." She walked away, leaving Matt with the image of 2 tall women standing at the gate of a station that no longer had a rue shooter, calling a name that would never be answered. When the wake wound down, Andy found Matt on the veranda of the homestead, looking at the paddocks. "You're going to leave again, aren't you?" Andy asked. "I have a boat in Greece." "I was halfway through a refit when Mum died." "You could stay." "No, I can't." Andy sat down beside him. They were quiet for a long time, the way they had learned to be quiet together in the years after the crash when words were too heavy and silence was the only thing that fit. I need to ask you something, Matt said. Okay. Would you want to know who your father was? Andy looked at the horizon. I used to ask that question a lot. I used to think that if I just found the name, everything would make sense. But it doesn't work that way, does it? No, it doesn't. I have a wife, I have kids, I have a station that I'm turning into a nature reserve. I have a life. Andy turned to look at Matt. I'm happy. If I knew the name, would it change anything? Matt considered lying. He considered giving Andy the truth that Lorna had believed, the story of Miles Beaumont and the letter and the apology. But that was not the truth. And Andy had earned better than another lie. It would change nothing that matters, Matt said. Then I don't want to know. Andy smiled, the same sideways grin he had had as a boy when he told Matt about forgetment. A forgetment is a free pass. Remember? I'm taking it. Matt put his hand on Andy's shoulder, and for a moment they were not an uncle and a nephew sharing a secret that had haunted them for 40 years. They were just two men who had survived the same storm, sitting on the same veranda, watching the same sunset. Wallaby Ridge. 3 days after the funeral, Matt walked to Wallaby Ridge. He did not plan to. His body simply led him there, the way it had led him 1,000 times before, to the place where the air was clean and the ridge fell away into blue distance, and he could pretend the past was just a story someone else had lived. The fairy wrens were still there, and the bull ants, and the eucalypts that Lorna's mother had planted. The ridge had not changed. It was waiting for him, the way it had always waited. Car approached on the track. Matt did not turn. He knew the engine sound a Land Rover, but not one of his. He knew who was coming before she got out. The geologist walked up the ridge and stopped a few feet away. Her hair was gray now, cut short, her face lined by years and responsibility. She wore a pale blue blouse and sensible trousers, and for a moment Matt saw her as she had been at the bachelor's and spinster's ball, the navy satin, the red lipstick, the woman who had asked him to dance. Hello, Matt? Bonnie. She sat down on the flat rock beside him, leaving a careful distance. Andy called me. He said I should come. He's good at that. They were quiet. The wind moved through the trees, and somewhere below, a crow called to its mate. I never stopped loving you, Bonnie said. I tried. I married a man named Bob Gracechurch. He was a good man, kind, stable, exactly what I thought I needed. She paused. It didn't work. I heard. I spent 30 years wondering what I had done wrong, whether I had pushed too hard, asked too many questions, whether there was something in me that made you close off. It wasn't you. I know that now. Bonnie looked at him. But you never told me what it was. Matt looked at the horizon. The jigsaw pieces were clicking into place in his chest. Andy's happiness, Lorna's death, Pete's departure, the wreckage of his own life. He had spent so long guarding the secret that it had become a cage, but the cage had no lock. He could step out any time he chose. I couldn't marry you because I was Andy's father, Matt said. Bonnie turned to him, her face unreadable. The night in the shearing shed, after the crash. I was drunk, brain damaged, barely conscious. She was desperate, and it happened. She had Andy. She tried to kill him and herself in the mine, and I spent the rest of my life making sure no one ever found out. Not Lorna, not Andy, not you. Bonnie was silent for a long time. He could see her processing, the geologist in her turning the information over, testing its weight. If you had told me, she said, I would have understood. I know, but I couldn't risk it. If one person knew, the secret would spread, and Andy would have to carry it. His carrying it anyway. He just doesn't know. He knows. He chose not to know. That's different. Bonnie nodded slowly. I was jealous of you once. You had this whole world that you wouldn't share with me. I thought it meant you didn't trust me. I trusted you more than anyone. That's why I couldn't risk it. She reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were warm, the skin familiar in a way that made his chest ache. I'm sorry I pushed you away, she said. I'm sorry I let you go. They sat on the ridge until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. The fairy wren came and went, feeding his chicks, oblivious to the two old people who had found their way back to each other. What happens now? Bonnie asked. Andy has a plan. He wants to scatter Monty's ashes at sea. He thinks I should take the lugger. You still have the lugger? Miles Beaumont gave me a croquet set once. And I kept it for 40 years. You think I'd throw away a boat? Bonnie laughed, and the sound was the same as it had been in 1969, when she swam naked in the dam and told him she was a geologist. Let's go scatter some ashes, she said. Montes last water. On a beach near Port Grace, the helicopter set down the lugger. From the ridge where Andy stood with his family, the machine had been a distant insect carrying the boat toward the coast. But here on the sand, the rotors beat the air, and the purling lugger sat where it had been lifted from the yard, the skeleton of timber and hope that Matt had rebuilt with his own hands. Matt and Bonnie carried the urn Monty MacBride's ashes, carried in a brass container that had sat on the mantelpiece for 70 years, waiting for a promise to be fulfilled. They waded into the water. The surf was gentle, and the sand was white, and the sun was warm on their faces. Matt opened the urn and poured the ashes into the sea. They swirled in the current, gray against the blue, then separated and settled into the vastness. He would have liked this, Bonnie said. He would have said it took us bloody long enough. Bonnie linked her arm through his, and they stood together in the water, watching the waves carry Monty MacBride to his final rest. What now? Bonnie asked. We could sail. I spent 30 years learning how. Might as well put it to use. Bonnie leaned into him. I'd like that. They walked back to the beach, where the helicopter waited, its rotors already starting to turn. The pearl lugger sat on the sand, its hull gleaming, ready for the sea that had always been its home. Matt paused at the edge of the water, looking back at the land. The red cliffs, the white sand, the eucalypts clinging to the ridge. For a moment, he thought he saw a figure standing on the cliffs, a woman in a mint green dress, her hair blowing in the wind. Then the figure was gone, and there was only the land and the sea and the sound of the waves. Matt? Coming! He turned and walked towards the boat, toward Bonnie, toward the life he had waited 60 years to live. The helicopter lifted them off the beach, the lugger swinging beneath it like a child's toy, and they rose into the air, watching the land shrink beneath them. The station became a dot on the red earth, the ridge a green smear, the cemetery a pale rectangle, and then there was only the ocean, blue and vast, taking everything they had ever been and folding it into itself. Their deeds, good and bad, destined to join the vast ocean of human forgetments. Matt looked at Bonnie, her face lit by the sun, her hand in his. I found you, he said. You took your time. Am here now. She smiled, and they flew on. The heaviest word in the novel isn't secret, isn't silence, isn't even Matt is the father. It's a word an 11-year-old boy invented for himself, forgetment. Andy MacBride uses it to describe what should be there but is missing. Not forgetting, but an active choice not to remember. A knowledge management strategy, not a cognitive failure. The word surfaces when he goes through his mother's possessions, grows as he stands in a cemetery murmuring you could be my father to stranger graves, and still props him up at 40 when he refuses the final answer. This isn't evasion, it's the freedom he fought for himself. M.L. Stedman waited 12 years to deliver her second book. Her debut, The Light Between Oceans, sold over 3 million copies worldwide, was translated into more than 30 languages, and was adapted for the screen in 2016 by Michael Fassbender and Alicia Vikander. That book's core dilemma was a moral choice. Should a couple raise a baby that floated to them from the sea as their own? In the end, the truth is laid bare, the cost is enormous, and everyone is shattered into painful release. For 12 years, Stedman published no fiction, not because she couldn't write, but because she was waiting to write a different story. The Australian literary establishment has widely noted that A Far-flung Life deliberately refuses the narrative model of her first book. Truth doesn't need to be spoken aloud to carry meaning. Instead, meaning resides precisely in not being spoken. Both works share the same mother theme, people guarding secrets to protect those they love, but they exit through completely different doors. This isn't a regression, it's an honest recalibration of a writer's own abilities. If you place Stedman in the lineage of Australian family secret novels, say Tim Winton's Cloud Street, about two families sharing a single house in Western Australia, you find a key difference. Winton's family secrets eventually lead toward reconciliation and acceptance. Stedman's family secrets have no exit. They don't lead to an ending, they are the ending itself. She makes the secret the destination, not the obstacle before it. That's why this book moves you, not because it solves the riddle of the father, but because it admits that some questions don't need answers, and some answers can only be obtained when you stop seeking. Stedman wrote a story about silence, but her silence isn't evasion. It's a form of love. Publishers Weekly called it a family epic written in silence, noting that Stedman's refusal to resolve the truth in the conventional way is precisely what sets it apart from mainstream Australian literature. To prevent it, if you're tired of family stories where everything gets explained in the end, this book is for you. So when the helicopter hoists that purling lugger, when the coastline shrinks to a smear of red in the distance, you don't walk away with a mystery solved. You walk away with a secret that was honored and a word invented by an 11-year-old boy. That word is forgetment. It's not a cognitive failure, it's the shape of love. For a family that began with never swerve for a kangaroo, that might be the only inheritance they could leave behind.